The Ultras divide opinion among fans. Who are they and how big a deal are they? And is it all over for Kasper Schmeichel? I'm Charlotte Cohen, and alongside Blair McNally and Stephen McGowan, we'll be on the terraces taking a look at fan culture. Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, all the news, views and analysis you need on Thursday the 19th of March. And today we take a closer look at the Ultras phenomenon.
It sounds like a Marvel film, doesn't it? The rise of the Ultras. But just the sort of prevalence of groups who identify in a particular way in Scottish football seems to have gained a bit of traction.
From the drums and the tifos to the black tracksuits and the Spider-Man masks, are they and their behaviour a problem for clubs and football authorities?
Just incredible scenes. In fact, incredible scenes right now because there are a lot of fans on the pitch. They need to get this sorted. They need to get this cleared very quickly.
But is everything about the Ultras negative? And has Kasper Schmeichel played his last ever game?
Chance here at the edge of the box. Celtic in trouble and Stuttgart scores. Schmeichel can't keep it out. It's been knocked on by Alcaraz. Schmeichel got the merest of touches to it.
We'll keep you in the loop with everything Scottish football in the next 20 minutes.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
And alongside me to do all of that, Blair McNally, YouTuber and Partick Thistle fan and leader, featurer in the Ultras documentary. Blair, question for you. How would you sum up what an Ultra is?
I would say an ultra comes from the it's actually I studied this in my dissertation. It comes from a term from Greece, and basically it comes down to an ultra fanatic of a fan who's willing to go over the top to support their football club. It just means that you're willing to step over the line and do more than the average fan. Sometimes that could be positive, sometimes that could be negative. That's a discussion that we're going to have today, of course. That's a discussion that we cover in the Ultras documentary that's just come out on the BBC. And yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. I think it's an adult conversation that Scottish football's needed to be had for a good while. And I think it's important that we now sit down at the table and discuss it as a country.
And alongside us to chat about all of that, Stephen McGowan, Herald football writer. Stephen, you maybe have a slightly different understanding of what an ultra is?
No, I mean, I think what Boyd has said there is right. It is about treading a line, and that's the balance that Scottish football has to find. It has to find the balance between the good parts, which are the noise, the colour, the vibrancy, and the bad parts, which are the pyrotechnics and the occasional violence towards each other and towards stewards and police, and there needs to be a set of ground rules in order that they can find common ground, I think.
Well, yeah, let's talk a bit more about this, because Blair, you mentioned the new documentary that's just come out. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what goes on in it?
Yeah, so over the last year, BBC have just been following me around, and we have been working together. So on a new documentary about Ultras. So Ultras is something that I've always been very, very, let's say, obsessed in. I've always loved the high energy style of these fanatics at the football. I've always been obsessed with football since I was a young boy. Used to always pay good attention to the Wild Boys when they first came through Scottish football. Their enthusiasm, their raw energy, even to all the way over to Amsterdam with the Ajax Ultras. There was something that we'd not really seen in football before, and for a young boy like me who was so passionate about football, this brought an energy that I felt I could express myself in. Now, I always wanted to be an ultra when I was younger, but I felt that wasn't the case because it was frowned upon. People didn't really look at them as something that was positive back 10, 15 years ago. So over time, when I started YouTube and I started to realise that this was something that people actually did enjoy, when I went and done videos and seen what we could do with the ultra scene, I just went for it and started promoting the ultra scene and started trying to get a, shall we say, fashionable craze in this country, all with the hope of getting kids in this country out their houses, off of Xboxes, off of iPads, going to support the local teams and just making memories for life. And you see that in the documentary. We discuss, of course, all the positives alongside the negatives. There are lots of different points that can be put on the table, and I think it's a very, very important documentary in terms of like discussing everything that needs to be discussed.
I think one of the key things that comes out of it, Blair, and I think you kind of touched on it there, is that, I mean, a lot of clubs across Scotland have ageing fan bases. They have supporters. I mean, I live in Inverclyde, and I look at the Morton fan base. I think there was a survey that showed that most of them were over 50. So, ultras are bringing young fans into football grounds, and I think that's why we do need to find this accommodation, if you like, in this middle ground, because, I mean, effectively you're talking about fans who can bring valuable income to football clubs and attract more young fans. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and this was something I noticed as well, because I'm a Partick Thistle supporter, so you'll know if there's any club that's got an old fan base, it's a Harry Rags with the Prawn Sandwich Brigade. But even going to games with my granda, you did notice, like, it was such an older generation going to non-league games, because I played junior football as well, so even going to non-league games or playing non-league games, the fan base just didn't have that younger audience. And this was something that I wanted to maybe target, wanted to find how can we make it fashionable for young kids to get themselves away from the Premier League, to get themselves away from watching TV and thinking football's a TV show. Because my favourite phrase is football's not a TV show, but how could we make it fashionable? How could we make it something that these kids wanted to get involved in and bring the youth into our game in Scotland and make it something that we can work towards? And I felt with the energy and with the colour and just the passion that you can bring to the games, the ultra scene was perfect for something to work with.
I just wonder, Blair, what you kind of make, because obviously we saw the second episode of the documentary kind of focuses on the negative side of things. And, you say we want to get young kids off their phones, off their iPads, out going to games, supporting their local teams. But there is obviously the big worry about slipping into that negative behaviour, that violent behaviour. How do we, or football clubs probably in particular, guard against that sort of behaviour whilst also maintaining the atmosphere and the noise that these ultra groups bring?
I think efforts need to be put in place. I think, of course, rules need to be put in place first of all, but to me, the most important thing in these circumstances is education. I feel there's no education in Scottish football at the moment, and people are able to just run about and do free will. That's where the problems come in, where a lot of, say, younger kids or young teenagers or young adults are coming into the game and they're not 100% on what's right and wrong. Of course, they have an idea, they have a knowledge, but what we need education programs put in place. We need clubs to be able to work with these education programs, and we need groups to be able to work with these education programs if they want to cooperate, if they want to involve with the club. We need everybody on the same table. We need everybody working together. And I feel that the problem right now is nobody's on the same page. Everybody's clashing. You've got the media who are putting mad headlines out. You've got the fans who are rebelling in such a rebellious country with such rebellious people, as we've known Scotland to be for centuries. And it just feels as if nobody's really clicking together, and that's where that's where problems are coming. People are clashing and things are spiralling out of control in certain manners where we could maybe get it under control a lot better.
There's an interesting, I did a piece fairly recently actually with Nicky Reid of the SPFL Trust and Dan Armstrong and Queen of the South as the chief executive there, and they were talking about the SPFL have launched this pilot project for education, you're referring to there, Blair, where kids who are being a bit fast and loose with pyrotechnics are brought in a dozen at a time to talk about the issue. And what Dan was saying in particular was a lot of the kind of young team and the young kids, they didn't realise that pyrotechnics were wrong, because quite often it's aping behaviour they see elsewhere. They see the PSG Ultras and they say, well, we fancy a bit of that. But the problem isn't in Scotland is that pyrotechnics are illegal in public places unless it's kind of like responsibly supervised and things. So it's kind of educating them in that and working with them and saying, well, look, we'll give you this if you give us something back. and just finding that accommodation and that middle ground. The problem with that comes, of course, with bigger clubs where, you have maybe more headstrong individuals leading them and maybe a bigger movement who are more difficult to control because ultimately ultras, as the name suggests, as Blair kind of said in his opening address, it's anti-authoritarian in nature, isn't it? They want to challenge, they want to probe, they want to be a bit edgy. It's just finding that middle ground.
I think what's very important in this case, specifically for pyrotechnics, is thinking about it maturely. Is it ever going to go away 100%? I think what we're seeing at Scottish football, what we're seeing across European football with the rise in social media, with young kids seeing it on TV, with videos being seen of fans marching, whatever. What we need to do in terms of education is, first of all, educate them on the problems that come with it. Of course, you spoke about the risks of the heat, etc., the risks of being burnt, etc. But I think, first of all, what we need to focus on is making sure these people know how to use them safely, and then trying to eradicate it using common sense, where you know that there's going to be people, ultras, using pyrotechnics for the next couple of years, especially. So why are we trying to just clamp down on it when we know we've got such a rebellious state? Why are we not working with it and making people understand, hold it away from yourself, don't swing it about, don't throw it, don't do this, don't do that. These are simple things that I think a mature state could probably educate. And I think when you've got like fan bases who just want to be the biggest, who just want to be the best, it's very, very difficult to just tell them no, because especially in Scotland, it's just not going to happen.
But the problem with that is that the Scottish Government are the ones who are saying that pyrotechnics are illegal. It's against the law. I mean, they've been having 3 monthly round tables in Edinburgh where the politicians, Marie Todd, the sports minister's been meeting with the SPFL and the SFA and so on. And I think Marie Todd went to the semi-finals, the League Cup semi-finals that were delayed by the smoke from the pyrotechnics, which appears to have been, I think if I saw in the documentary, an act of rebellion against not being allowed tifos. And I think she was asthmatic and didn't really appreciate the impact of that smoke. So I don't really think it's so much football itself, although football has concerns about the damage it can do to pitches and things, as cracking down on pyrotechnics. I think it's that football was under pressure from higher authorities, as in the Scottish Government, to crack down on this. So they've been kind of squeezed in the middle a little bit. And that's what makes it difficult for them to encourage what you would call responsible use, because they've been told from above, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. What I like, I'm very impressed with, is Scandinavian states. So the way they deal with it, I think when you've got people that are certificate trained and people that know how to use them and discard them, and they work alongside these groups and they work alongside these football clubs, etc., it's a much more mature way of going about things. They still get their pyro displays, but it's discarded and it's done in safe zones where people know it's going to be happening, etc. I think these are things that could be probably brought to tables. Is pyro going to go away in the next couple of years? I think that's the main question that we need to be mature about and think, are we going to be able to clamp down on it and get rid of it totally? I'm not so sure on that.
Well, more generally, I'm wondering, Blair, what you make. We didn't really get a huge amount on the Old Firm. There was a little bit in the doc, but wondering what you make about Celtic banning the Green Brigade, because they have obviously got themselves in a bit of bother and have ended up with this ban. But that, I suppose that begs a bigger question of clubs acting to stop negative behaviour. But first of all, I'll ask you, Blair, what do you make of Celtic banning the Green Brigade?
I think it's all just club politics with the Green Brigade, to be honest with you. I think there's stuff happening higher up with people in charge. They need to get it sorted out internally. I think it's having a terrible effect on Celtic. They're scraping by games they should probably be a lot more controlling in. Of course, Celtic have got the problems with players, etc. But you speak to I interviewed Callum McGregor, and even he's saying that you feel it on the park, you can feel it in the club. It just creates a bit of a divide, and it's not good for the players. If Celtic, as I spoke about in terms of the pyrotechnics, spoke about in terms of programmes, etc. If Celtic want to move ahead in a positive manner, it's something that needs to be fixed, because you've got, yet again, a big divide. And any divide is not healthy at a football club, especially a football club the size of Celtic, that should be doing well in Europe, that should be going toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich. I think ultras are very, very important for a football club, especially a club like Celtic, where they have the big European nights, where they need that atmosphere when maybe things aren't going their way, when they're 1-0 down to Dundee at home. You know, that's where you find it difficult when you've not got ultras in the stadium. But of course, there's two sides to the coin as well. You've got a club who have rules in place. You've got a club who want to be squeaky clean. It's difficult. Of course, everybody's got their own views. But yet again, I think people need to sit down at a table and discuss what's best for the football club.
I think it's important in that situation to remember why that happened, or why the reason it was cited. It was a home game against Falkirk, where there were allegations of assaults against stewards and against police officers. Now, the criminal justice system will deal with why and wherefores of that, and how that's going to be resolved. But ultimately, that shows the yin and the yang of this situation, which is that, everybody wants the good parts of the Green Brigade, but there are these bad parts which the two sides are finding it difficult to find compromise on. You know, there's been some tentative discussions, and Celtic want to lay down this kind of set of rules, and the Green Brigade are saying, well, you know, so you know, there is this creative tension between the two sides that needs to be resolved. But ultimately, when it comes down to is any sphere of public life, be it cinema, be it a concert, you know, be it rugby or whatever, if you want to buy a ticket, if you want to go in, then you kind of need to abide by the rules. And if you don't abide by the rules, then you don't get in. That's how society operates, and that's kind of what needs to come through when it comes to ultras. So if they want to get back in, they kind of need to play by the club's rules, because the club are ultimately the hosts of the game.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, Blair, isn't it? We need to be able, in order to have all the good parts, you need these people to take responsibility for their actions and be held accountable if things don't meet the standards that the clubs expect.
Yeah, 100%. I think when things go wrong, you should come together as a collective and maybe work with it. What I don't really agree with is when you've got situations that haven't been haven't had a full outcome yet, and you're getting a blanket ban on a full group. When you don't know the full outcome, you don't know what's really went on, because you've got two sides of the coin. You've got one side saying they've done one thing, one side saying they've done another. So I think, is it fair to ban 150, probably not even 150, 190 others, when maybe 10 are involved in an incident? Of course, they're part of a group, but if you don't have a full outcome of it, is it right to maybe ban them without the outcome? That's just a question maybe to be raised.
Yeah, I suppose it's the whole thing of collective responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I wonder, Stephen, we talked about the Green Brigade, if we're any closer to any sort of resolution. I'd seen Celtic's statement, I think last week, about them having a meeting with the advisory group and putting these conditions in place for the return of the Green Brigade. But has there been any movement on that, do you know?
That I'm aware of, in terms of positive movement, in terms of it looking like it's going to be resolved anytime soon. I mean, I think to go back to Blair's point, I think there are one or two members of the Green Brigade Celtic would rather were not in the ground, and I think there's a reluctance to kind of sacrifice them, if you like. But in terms of ending this saga, I think as Blair said earlier, it would be positive for Celtic, because they're coming into a time of the season where they do need to be united. They do need to have every kind of voice behind them to try and drag them over the line, because they are still trailing Hearts in the league. But that has to be an arrangement which suits all parties, and at the moment they're not quite there.
This might be a silly question, Stephen, but what's to stop Celtic, if they don't want the Green Brigade back in, what's to stop them from just saying, right, we'll give your season tickets to other people who are on the wait. They've got like a massive waiting list. They're not even taking more people onto the waiting list. What do you think is stopping them from just saying, right, bin it all off, we'll give your tickets to somebody else?
Because ultimately the Green Brigade do have a lot of support and sympathy amongst other supporters. I mean, Celtic are a club in a state of civil war with their own fan base, ultimately. And it's not just the Green Brigade. I mean, that tends to be the kind of lightning rod for it. But actually, if you look at it, there's a lot of disenfranchised and unhappy supporters amongst the wider rank and file. So I think if they were to say, definitely, that's it for the Green Brigade, it's all over, that would be a move that would go down pretty poorly in an already fairly febrile and fragile situation. So I think it's best for both sides. They do try and find an agreement. They do try and find an accommodation. At the moment, there's no absolute evidence that that's there yet, but I think they will get there eventually.
And Blair, you mentioned, the importance of groups like the Green Brigade. We see it at Celtic games week in, week out, the atmosphere that they create. You are obviously a real proponent of ultra culture. How much do you think clubs need to embrace these groups, and how do you think they can do that in a way that mitigates any problems?
I think what was discussed in the Ultras documentary was excellent. It covered all sides, but what it did discuss is before this Ultras phase came into Scottish football, crowds were dwindling. The game was, in my eyes, dying. The game wasn't that exciting in Scottish football. You obviously had Rangers that were out of the leagues. Celtic's crowds were near enough an all-time low. Even my club, Partick Thistle, behind the goal, the North Stand, was just sitting empty every week. Now, for example, Partick Thistle, we've sold out this North Stand 3-4 times simply because there's an Ultras group behind that goal. Falkirk, they've sold out their stadium. There's so many examples in Scottish football that show what a positive Ultras group can do to a football club. Jamie Swinney speaks about it so much, how important the group have been to Falkirk as a football club. And I've seen it time and time again. The Wild Boys at Motherwell, Keith Lasley, Motherwell, is one of Motherwell's legends, the difference that they made to the club. So I think if we can get Ultras groups on board, if we can get everybody working on the same page and working towards a positive side for their football club alone, I think it's such an important thing for Scottish football. Because let's be honest here, without them in stadiums, you can hear a pin drop, and it's not what we want.
And you touched on as well before, Blair, about the kind of thing, this culture you see in the likes of Sweden, we see it Italy, Germany, France. Is that, do you think, feasible for Scotland, for ultra culture to get to that level?
I think you just don't want to be like English football. I think as a Scottish person, you look at English football and you think, oh my God, like it's just a tourist league now. There's no soul in it. It's been bought over. It's become a business rather than what football's really about. And now Scottish football's still got that feeling with the scruff of the neck, where still get that hardness, still get that old school feeling of turning up to the game and giving that raw passion, maybe shouting at the linesman or giving abuse to the opposition manager, or, you know, I'm not saying these things are right, but that's what brings football. It's rawness. That's football to me, you know. And the ultra scene really brings that raw passion. And what the thing that it's most important, the factor that's most important in it is it brings a collective. It brings something that people in society can be a part of, where there's not much going on in society nowadays. We've got a lot of issues. Poverty's rising, etc. That's a factor I've spoken about massively. Now, for 90 minutes, people can get away for life and go to the football, become a part of a collective, sing their heart out. And, you know, it's something special we've got on in Scotland. I think it would be too much to waste. As you spoke about, Europe, that is the benchmark. You do want to be looking at these massive sections behind the goal where you've got tens of thousands in Germany, Sweden, Italy, etc. And I think we're working towards that, but we just need to needle out some of the problems that we have got going on. Let's be mature about it here.
Well, I mean, what I was going to say, Charlotte, is what sets Scotland apart from other countries is that we are massively more reliant on match day income than most of these other countries are. That means that you are really dependent on your supporters to come through the turnstiles. We don't have the big television deals because clubs don't want every game appearing on television. They want to preserve those attendances. They want to preserve the crowds. So ultimately, you have to find a way to work with those crowds to keep them coming in and keep the income coming in as well.
Interesting, yeah. Well, you can watch the Ultras on BBC iPlayer right now. Right, let's talk a little bit about Kasper Schmeichel, who came out the other day and said he may have played his last game for Celtic, his last potentially game of his career. Stephen, I wonder what you make of the way that he's gone about this, because he comes out, I think, a couple of weeks ago and says, I'm going to need to take a 4 to 6 week break. I hurt my shoulder again. And then he comes out the other day on CBS and says, I'm basically finished. But no mention from any official club channel of anything that's going on. Martin O'Neill said in his pre-Motherwell presser that he would maybe be selected for the squad. He would have to wait and see. What do you make of it all?
It sounds as if Martin O'Neill's been trying to protect the player a bit in terms of not necessarily revealing something he didn't want revealed. He obviously knows it's been a sensitive situation. There's two sides to this, isn't there? Because Kasper Schmeichel's not been in good form for quite some time. We've seen some pretty high-profile mistakes. You go back to the Scottish Cup final last May, where he kind of threw one in against Aberdeen. There's been a series of mistakes this season as well. He didn't have a great performance against Rangers when Celtic lost 3-1 at home. There were a couple of goals against Stuttgart when they lost 4-1, where he looked slow to get down, and it looked as if there was an evident physical issue there that was impeding his ability to move freely. And now we know what that is. So I think there are some supporters who are saying, well, how long has this been evident for? And why was it not detected sooner, just how serious it is? Because if it had been, then it might have made a difference to Celtic's season. They might not have been in quite the difficult situation they are in now. The flip side to that is it's a real shame for the player himself. He's had a brilliant career, a decorated career. He's 39. And all of a sudden, he's staring down the barrel of the end. It looks as if his career might well be over. So it's a real personal shame for him. And it's a shame for Celtic as well that they kind of allowed it as somehow or other it went this long and they didn't get to the heart of it sooner, because if they had, as I say, the season might be in a slightly more healthy place than it is now.
Yeah, I do wonder how much of it was Schmeichel disguising the injury, because he obviously mentioned that he was desperate to go to the World Cup. He really wanted to, I suppose, prove he was fit. And how much of it is Celtic, the staff, the medical team, maybe not picking up on just how severe it was?
Well, I suppose yeah. I mean, listen, if you have an experienced senior player like Schmeichel, you can imagine that the staff would ask him to give them an honest assessment. How are you? Are you feeling okay? Are you feeling up to it? If he keeps saying yes, then it's difficult for him to ignore that. But the evidence has been there for some time now. It looks as if he hasn't been moving freely. So only people inside Celtic can answer to what extent they've been guided by the player himself. Maybe the medical staff had their doubts, but as long as he's saying, no, I'm okay, then they have to go with that, because he is a really senior and important and influential player in the dressing room. So it's been a difficult situation, a difficult set of circumstances. It looks as if they've got to the heart of it now. And from Kasper Schmeichel's point of view, it looks like it's going to end probably quite sadly in a way.
Well, that is all we've got time for. Many thanks to Blair and Stephen, and thank you for listening. Remember, we are here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll catch you again tomorrow.
It's petty, it's ill-informed.
Are President Trump's cuts having an adverse effect on research?
It's pandemonium.
What number's that in the periodic?
PD, number 47. I don't know.
I've done the shooting clays before. The longer you do it, the sorer obviously it gets.
When Craig said there he'd been shooting the clays, I imagined him out the back line. Somebody's washing,
William Shatner, his secretary, contacted me to say, when Bill has a question now and again, can he contact you? And then one time he called me up and he wanted to know, David, what is a photon? I'm thinking, this is incredible. Captain Kirk wants to know what a photon is,
I once met a guy who referred to a globe as a bomb app. A ball map.
A ball map.
Look at the ball map. Well, what we normally do is spin the ball map and we see where we go on holiday.
The Off the Ball podcast, available every Monday on BBC Sounds.